And I would like to welcome to the stage our presenter, Jeri Diehl-Cusack.
Well, thank you. I met Kim years ago, and it was nice to know that she was back here in Worthington, where I've now been living for the last 4 years. I must tell you, I am a retired librarian. I love books. I also have a lifelong interest in presidential history. And one little other detail, I do have a bachelor's degree in French as well as a master's in library science. So this all kind of fits together for today's topic, because I found a wonderful book published by the White House Historical Association called Mona Lisa in Camelot, and wanted to pursue that story and realized this would be a perfect topic, I thought, to present at the McConnell Arts Center. So it's quite an honor to be here in the inaugural season and to share this topic with you. So I got a question for everybody. Do you remember where you might have been back on December 19th of 1962? It was a Wednesday. Does that help? You know, maybe. I think I was probably 6 days before Christmas. I think I was in Barbara Lee's classroom at Edison Elementary School in Grandview Heights, Ohio, because it wasn't quite the holiday yet. It was a Wednesday, so yes. But we're going to kind of go back in time over 60 years ago, almost 61 years ago now. And the story revolves around a 33-year-old woman who happened to be First Lady of the United States on December 19th of 1962, who managed to find a way to bring to the United States a 450-plus-year-old piece of artwork of another woman. And this piece of artwork ended up being on exhibit here in the United States in 2 cities for a total of 52 days. And during that time, those 52 days, about 2 million people got to visit and see these exhibits and to see this piece of artwork. So we're talking about the Mona Lisa in Camelot. So that should make you realize that we're talking about a very young First Lady named Jaqueline Kennedy. Of course, she's the wife of our 35th president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And, you know, she brought something new and different to the White House. Her predecessors were women who probably would have been her mother's age, at least, you know, beginning even with Eleanor Roosevelt, who was in her 50s when she became First Lady, and then Bess Truman, who was probably about the same age when she became First Lady, and Mamie Eisenhower. They were older women. They had furnished the White House with whatever was available and whatever suited their taste, but their taste was quite different than Jaqueline Kennedy's. So who was she? Who was this woman who was the wife, a very young wife of our 35th president? And what did she bring to her years that she served as First Lady? Well, it's said that to the role of First Lady, Mrs. Kennedy brought beauty, intelligence, and cultivated taste. A very young woman, but she had had some education and some travels and some background that maybe her predecessors never got an opportunity to enjoy. She was born in Southampton, New York on July 28th of 1929. She was educated at a young woman's like finishing school called Miss Porter's School. It was in the state of Connecticut. And then she went on from Miss Porter's School, along with some of her classmates, to Vassar College, one of those elite women's schools. That was up in Vassar is located in Poughkeepsie, New York. Not a hub of culture, perhaps, but she spent 2 years at Vassar. And then she got her dream year abroad. She got to study during her junior year in France at 2 schools, the University of Grenoble and also at the Sorbonne in Paris. And she studied not only what was required of her to learn while she was taking her junior year classes in France, but she soaked up the culture and the atmosphere and the language, and she was fluent in French, and she loved everything about the French world. In fact, she was such a Francophile that she chose, when possible, to have her first name pronounced as it would be in French. Not Jacqueline, like we would say in English, is Jaqueline en français, right? So Jaqueline Lee Bouvier, also a French name, is being educated in Europe for a year, but she comes back. She can't quite imagine herself going back to Vassar, back to Poughkeepsie. So she finishes her undergraduate studies at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Her mother and stepfather lived close by in Virginia, and so they must have said, okay, just, as long as you finish your degree, go ahead, you go to George Washington. She graduated in the spring of 1951 with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in French literature. And she loved a certain, not only did she love all things French, she loved a certain author. Let me read to you for the first time here from Mona Lisa in Camelot. It says, Jackie's admiration for all things French was also widely known, as well as her fantastic desire for historic knowledge. So she also loved everything French. And in fact, as I mentioned, she preferred the French pronunciation of her given name, Jaqueline. Jackie had a degree in French literature and was captivated by the fiction of André Malraux, a French author, who had won the Prix Goncourt for La Condition Humaine, Man's Fate, a book that he had published as a younger man, which elevated this French author, André Malraux, to global attention. It says that Malraux's thought-provoking books made a profound impression on Jackie Bouvier, and this friend even points out that she knew Malraux's works inside and out. He was one of the exceptional figures and truly an original mind of the era, and Jackie was powerfully drawn to his ideas about culture, humanity, and social justice. So a lot of things that she might, find helpful to know something about later in her life as she moves forward. Let's talk about what happens to her. I forgot to read the rest of that line. She did get a job as an inquiring photographer. You may have seen pictures of her as a young woman just out of college. She's going around Washington, D.C. for the Washington Times-Herald newspaper, taking photographs and kind of doing quick interviews of some of the younger and maybe more fashionable young men who are there in Washington, D.C. serving in politics. And she meets a young congressman from Massachusetts. His name was John Fitzgerald Kennedy. JFK runs for the Senate from Massachusetts in 1952 and is elected and starts his time in the Senate in 1953. Well, by then, they're a couple. Jackie and Jack are a couple, and they end up marrying. John Fitzgerald Kennedy is 36 when he marries Jaqueline Lee Bouvier on September 12th of 1953. She was 24, so he was 12 years older than she was. And then on January 20th of 1961, at just 31 years of age, Jackie Kennedy is now the wife of the incoming president of the United States. She's the third youngest first lady ever. Only Frances Folsom Cleveland and the second wife of John Tyler, Julia Gardner Tyler, were younger when they became first lady. But she's put into an amazing position that she really probably never anticipated being in. But she now has a platform, she now has a voice, and she uses it quite well. Here's a picture from their wedding. Supposedly, I've heard or read that she didn't like that dress at all. Her mother chose it, and she didn't think it was quite what she wanted, but I think it looks lovely. And Jackie Kennedy almost immediately starts using her influence and her interests and her resolve to make the White House a more representative, to make it more representative of American culture, American history, American furnishings, American, she's going to try to not redecorate the White House that she's moving into with her husband and her family. She's trying to restore it to the grandeur that she thinks it deserves. And under her influence, she also decides that she wants to establish a White House Historical Association. So she gets to work on that immediately in 1961. She also has a curator of the White House named so that she can know what belongs to the White House, what's in storage, what could she bring back into the building to replace some of the furnishings that her predecessors had chosen to use, but she didn't think were of the quality or the historic value that she would like to have. So she helped to collect and exhibit the very best artifacts of American history and culture and bring them to the White House during her 1,000 days as First Lady. Most of you know that JFK's presidency lasted almost exactly 1,000 days, 2 years, 10 months, and 2 days from the 20th of January of 1961 until he was killed on November 22nd of 1963. And most of you probably know, especially from the title of this talk and the description in the publicity, that time period came to be known to some as Camelot. It was there was some equivalency with the legendary, brilliant but tragically short period of time. So anyway, let's keep it moving here. Jackie Kennedy, early in her quest to restore the White House and to bring some valuable artwork and furnishings back to inside the building and to make it more of a museum for the American people, not for her and her family, but something that the entire country could be proud of. She realizes that she has kind of an in with the man who's the current director of the National Gallery of Art. The National Gallery was dedicated back in 1941. FDR would have just finished his, just started rather, his third term in office in January of 1941. And FDR was at the dedication ceremony on March 17th of 1941. So it had just turned, or was about to turn 20 years old in 1961. And from 1956 until 1969, Jackie Kennedy's stepfather's good buddy and friend, a man named John Walker III, happened to be serving as the director of the National Gallery of Art. So Jackie Kennedy knew of this man. She'd met this man. She had visited the National Gallery of Art, because her mother and stepfather were living nearby in Virginia. She had visited often as a teenager, and she found out that there were 4 paintings by Paul Cézanne, a French impressionist who I guess is also a post-impressionist when I Googled a little bit more about him. She knew that there were 4 of his paintings that had been bequeathed to the White House, but one of the former first ladies didn't really care or didn't want them and said, why don't we just give them to the National Gallery of Art for storage and put them in storage and, for whenever. Jackie Kennedy learns about them. She makes an appointment to go see her stepfather's friend, John Walker, and to choose 2 of those Cézannes to bring back to the White House. They arrived there on May 3rd of 1961, so she's been First Lady for just over 3 months now. But kind of at the same, all of these visits to the National Gallery of Art, these phone calls with John Walker, all of this is kind of building a relationship which would eventually, despite some misgivings from Mr. Walker, would set in motion a plan to bring the famous Mona Lisa painting to the United States of America. So we're kind of setting the stage here. I wanted to show you a couple of pictures of John Walker at the National Gallery of Art. I took the next two pictures. You see this one kind of behind all the ferns or whatever plant that is. You can kind of see John Walker's, oh, I didn't turn on my pointer, but let's see if this is going to work. You can see John Walker's name up there as the second director of the National Gallery. And here's another angle. So I got to visit, I love to visit places that I'm talking about in my program. So I got to visit Washington, D.C. and the National Gallery of Art last December, and I took some pictures while I was there for you. Oops, there we go. So by May 3rd, go back. Oops. Yes, by May 3rd, these Cézannes are at the White House. Later in May, there's a state visit planned that JFK and his wife, Jaqueline Bouvier Kennedy, are going to visit France. Just a quick 3-day trip, May 31st through June 2nd. Just kind of, a whirlwind trip. And here we have the little program in French. It says, Trip to France, Voyage en France de Monsieur le Président des États-Unis d'Amérique et de Madame Kennedy. And it's, just what they had planned for them to do over this period of time. What they had planned for them to do was to have dinner with Charles de Gaulle, the president of France, and also André Malraux, who had just been appointed by de Gaulle as the Minister of Culture for the country of France. Jackie Kennedy is going to meet the author, the man, the thinker, the person who influenced her so much as she was studying in France and at the George Washington University. So let me read a little bit more for you about Charles de Gaulle. First, let me tell you that one of the press secretaries for JFK had arranged for a 15-minute interview of Jackie Kennedy to be broadcast in France on television the night before they arrived. Of course, she's speaking fluent French. She can answer every question. She can really impress these people because she knows the language, she knows the culture, and she's, let's see what it says here. The program provided an early glimpse into the lives and personalities of the Kennedys. Jackie conversed in fluent French for 15 minutes, covering a wide range of topics, including her interest in the arts and her love of Paris. She told viewers that she was a daughter of France and that culture was her passion and French taste was her ideal. The interview was broadcast the night before, and then the next day they have dinner with Charles de Gaulle. Now, Charles de Gaulle is known to some as being irritating, insufferably vain, inconsistent, and impossible to please. But he got to sit by Jackie Kennedy at dinner that night, and she chatted with him in her low, slow French during lunch, or I guess it was during lunch, and reports were that Charles de Gaulle barely touched his food because he was so deeply engaged with Jackie in such archaic topics as Louis XVI or the dynastic complexities of the later Bourbon. So, okay. And de Gaulle actually gave Jackie Kennedy a very high compliment when de Gaulle told JFK, Jackie knows more about French history than most French women do. So she knew, and And, she had a bit of beauty and charm, and, she was able to forge relationships in a way that perhaps her husband would benefit from long term. So she meets Charles de Gaulle. And then later that day, she meets André Malraux. And the very next day, he takes her on an extended visit to the Jeu de Paume, which is a French gallery in France, an art gallery. And yes, Malraux had painstakingly prepared for Jackie's cultural tour of Paris. It says that Malraux was smitten with his celebrated guest. She's a 31-year-old woman, but he's smitten with his celebrated guest. And in photographs in the Parisian press, he appears to be captivated by the American First Lady. The feeling was apparently mutual, this book says. Jackie bewitches, simpers, and bubbles with sophisticated banter alongside her French escort. They shared literary and cultural interests. They also shared a quick sense of humor. Malraux supposedly asked her, "What did you do before you married Jack Kennedy?" And she answered in French, "J'ai été pucelle." I was an innocent little virgin. So, little joke between the two of them. So, they have this wonderful state visit. Jackie's just amazing. And what does JFK famously say about this trip, this quick 3-day whirlwind trip? "I am the man who accompanied Jaqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I have enjoyed it. But most certainly so did Charles de Gaulle and André Malraux." So, no problem. I just wanted to just give you a little more background about de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle had been an army general. He led the Free French during World War II. He was born in 1890, so in 1961, he would have been about 70, going on 71 years old. He had been elected president of France in 1958, and he served there in that position until 1969. André Malraux was, as I said, appointed Minister of Culture in France by President de Gaulle in 1959. André Malraux was born in 1901, so he's a 60-year-old man when Jackie's over there visiting him in Paris. He's an author, a novelist, an art theorist, and again, he's won great regard for his book that he wrote, The Fate of Man, in 1933, I believe. Okay, just a little background on them. Jackie Kennedy, Jaqueline Bouvier Kennedy, that I sometimes will call JBK, is becoming a very important PR tool, public relations tool for her husband, JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. She's beautiful, she's cultured, she's well-dressed by Oleg Cassini. These are some images on the left and the right from the Museum of American History, the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and the First Lady's exhibit showing Jackie Kennedy's, one of her gowns here. And, these are some other older previous First Lady's gowns as well. But just, Jackie had style. Jackie had something special, right? And Jackie's going to start working her magic. And she's going to, not only assist her husband as he shares her feelings about the importance of history and art in the White House, but she's got some other projects that she's thinking of doing, and she's going to bring all these men along with her as she works her magic. She's not only working on a potential visit for her friends from France to the White House. She's also sponsoring and putting on other cultural events, performing arts events at the White House, including this one. These, again, the images I just brought up are from the Smithsonian, the American History Museum. But the larger photo shows Jackie with Pablo Casals, the cellist, and at a performance at the White House. So she's putting on events. She's bringing artists of all kind, as well as artwork and historic furnishings, to the White House. And I believe this is Rose Kennedy right here, Jackie and the president, along with the artist who performed that evening on November 13th of 1961. Jackie's also got another project up her sleeve. She's been working so diligently on the restoration of the White House that CBS is going to do a nationally televised tour of the White House that she's going to be leading a CBS correspondent named, I believe it's Charles Collingwood, around the building, and just sharing all of the changes that she's brought to the White House. There's going to be 56 million viewers watching all this. And she's working on this tour. She's working on a new guidebook for the White House and a state visit for her friends from France. And I found this postcard when I was in DC last year that says, suddenly, everything about her that had been a liability before, her hair that was different, her ability to speak French, that she didn't really enjoy the political part of her husband's campaigns. Everybody thought that Jackie Kennedy was a snob and hated politics. But when she got in the White House, all of those things that she had always done with culture and art and history suddenly became wonderful, suddenly became assets for her and for her husband. So, yes, she believed that the White House belongs to the American people. This is a little plaque that's outside the White House Historical Association's building in the Decatur House in Washington, D.C. So she has this tour. She hosted. All of these people tune in. Do any of you remember February of 1962? Good for you. I don't think I watched it, but you were among the 56 million that did. Lucky you. Okay, and here's the guidebook. I shared it with one of the today's attendees. This is a guidebook that she realized when people visited the White House, like she did, I believe for the first time in 1941, she had to go home empty-handed. There wasn't anything that she could take with her that she could learn from. So she envisioned a guidebook that was really meant for children, but written at a level so that they could grow into reading it and understanding the history and just the layout of the rooms and the furnishings and all the paintings and all the sculpture and all the artwork there and the history of some of the people who had lived there. It was written at a level that would be appropriate, maybe 6th grade or something, but adults would read it and enjoy it, and younger children could look at the pictures and eventually get to the point where they might want to appreciate all the information that's available. This was a publication that they had to borrow $40,000 to print. They didn't have any money. They had a patron who was willing to put up the money. They were selling copies of this for, I believe, just $1, maybe $1.25 back in the in 1962 or so. They sold out 250,000 copies in 3 months. So now this this guidebook is in its, I don't know, 40th printing or something. It probably cost you a good $20, $25 to get a fresh copy of this. But this is my 1964 copy. It's on the table in front of me here that I have put some displays there in case anybody wants to peek at them at the break or after the program. But it's got a letter from Jackie Kennedy in the very front of it explaining that she just wants people to appreciate the importance of the White House and all the culture and history that it embodies. Okay, so the Kennedys finally are able to negotiate to have André Malraux, the Minister of Culture of France, come to the White House. They had suggested another trip to another place, I believe in Seattle, And that just wasn't quite what he wanted to do. So it made sense for him to come to Washington, D.C. in May of 1962. So almost a year to the day that they had visited de Gaulle and Malraux in France. Malraux brings his wife, Madeleine, with him. They meet up with Jackie Kennedy, and they go to the National Gallery of Art, where Jackie's friend, John Walker, is going to do a tour of the entire gallery, a private tour for André Malraux and Madame Malraux. This is May 11th of 1962. So Malraux, has lots of comments on the different artwork that he's being shown, and I think John Walker wasn't quite as patient as he might have been as they walked through, and he wanted to, show him more, and he wanted less chatter or whatever. But there was chatter, and there was chatter let me see if I can find the right page. Page 45, I believe. There's chatter, they're walking around, and Jackie said, I hope that Malraux's visit would call attention to the importance of the arts. She made sure that the right people were there, and I'm sorry, I'm looking for this one page. She's saying to him, isn't it nice, to be here amongst all this art? And wouldn't it be great if the Mona Lisa could be shared with the people of the United States? And he thought about it. She said, I would love to see the Mona Lisa again and show her to Americans. So he thinks, and he finally replies, I'm sure in French, so maybe John Walker didn't know what he was saying, but Jackie Kennedy surely did. I'll see what I can do. And then there's a luncheon. The same day that they have this tour, the Monsieur and Madame Malraux and Jackie Kennedy and John Walker, they also are going, Malraux is going to a luncheon at the Overseas Writers Club. And there's a reporter there from the Washington Post who stands up to ask a question. He said, I've had this dream, and I just wonder what you think about it. I've been wondering if it might be possible that the Mona Lisa could be shown, could be exhibited in the United States. And André Malraux is thinking, this is the second time today I've heard this question. Maybe I should think about this some more. And he said, well, he again says, this is a possibility. Maybe. We'll see what happens. So the First Lady, Jackie Kennedy, had spent weeks planning a huge state dinner for the Malraux that evening. She knew so much about French cuisines, French culture, French traditions. She knew how to choose the best of all of that to impress André Malraux and his wife. And she also invited 175 esteemed guests from the world of American art and culture to mingle that night and to be there to also try to impress André Malraux. And once again, Jackie Kennedy charmed her guest of honor with her beauty, her repartee, and her knowledge of toutes choses françaises, everything French. He was, again, smitten. So here's some pictures from that evening. I think it's kind of interesting. You see the Malraux on the left and the Kennedys to the right on the lower level. You can see LBJ, and this is probably Lady Bird Johnson's hair right there behind them on the on the steps as they're approaching the dinner. And then André Malraux is chatting, very, very close, just speaking right into Jackie Kennedy's ear. They're having their own little private conversations. And in this book, Mona Lisa and Camelot, the author, Margaret Leslie Davis, who gets most of the credit for the information I'm sharing with you today, but I'm a librarian and I've done book talks all my life. So It says, as the candlelit party came to a close, Malraux leaned near Mrs. Kennedy's right ear and whispered a promise en français. Does anybody else speak French? A little bit? A little bit? He says, Je vais vous envoyer la Joconde. I am going to send to you the Joconde, which is the French name for something that's also known as La Gioconda in Italian or the Mona Lisa in English. Arguably the world's most famous and recognizable piece of artwork. And so I did a little bit of research that Leonardo da Vinci was actually from Florence, which at the time was not a part of Italy. It became part of Italy later. But he spent the last 3 years of his life in France. And that's sort of why his portrait of the wife of a Florentine, a man from Florence, the wife of this man from Florence, and his name was Francesco del Giocondo, so this painting was believed to have been finished sometime between 1504 and 1506. Da Vinci's in the last few years of his life, but he's living in France, and that's why the French end up with the painting, not Italy. And there were some hard feelings over that. But here is La Gioconda, La Joconde en français, or the Mona Lisa. But did you know how small this painting is? It was tiny. The dimensions of the Mona Lisa in inches or in feet, it was 2 feet 6 inches high, so 30 inches high, and 1 foot 9 inches or 21 inches wide. But it is, according to Wikipedia, the best known, most visited, most written about, most sung about, and most parodied work of art in the world. It was priceless. It was fragile. It was old. It was irreplaceable. And somehow Jackie Kennedy manages to get the Minister of Culture of France to agree to loan this piece of artwork, not to the United States, though, to her and to her husband, the President of the United States. That was kind of the stipulation. It's not just going in general to the United States, it's going to the Kennedys. So here's, again, I must share the credit for my talk today with the author of the Mona Lisa in Camelot. My copy is an older printing. The White House Historical Association that Jackie Kennedy established in 1961 is the publisher. They have a newer look to the reprinted copies here, a darker, different color. But there are copies. I looked in the Central Library Consortium to see if there were any copies you could borrow from a public library because I was a public librarian. There are none, I'm sorry to say, here in the Columbus area. They could probably get it through interlibrary loan of some sort, but you can also buy a copy if you're interested from the White House Historical Association. So, are we doing pretty well time-wise? Okay, 5 more minutes and we'll take a little break. Everybody good? Great, I'm gonna get a sip of water. So they, there are ups and downs and all kinds of complications to the negotiations of how they're going to make this loan happen. This loan of a very, old, very small, but very fragile piece of artwork that's already been stolen from the Louvre once and recovered back in the 19-teens. It was stolen by someone who worked there as a janitor or something, who took it, and it was hidden in a closet or something in Italy for several years before it was recovered and brought back. It was also taken out of the museum and put into safe storage during World War II because they were concerned about whether, the Louvre might be bombed at some point in time. But now, all of the experts who are employed by the Louvre are trying to figure out how in the world is it going to work out? How is it going to be safe to move this piece of fragile artwork from a climate-controlled environment in the Louvre, which is not, I don't believe it was even air-conditioned at the time, but it was such a large building, and the way it was constructed, it had pretty much a constant temperature there and a constant humidity level, and they would need to replicate that not only in Washington, D.C. at the National Gallery of Art, but in the storage unit that they would ship it in, however they decided to ship it. And they weren't sure at the time, it's 1962, but they're not sure whether to fly it by airplane. And supposedly Air Force One might have been available to bring the Mona Lisa to the United States. But somehow those folks over in France decided, no, it would be better to bring it over on a ship, on the on the SS France, one of the luxury liners that served, French folks of some wealth to travel back and forth across the Atlantic on a ship. They thought, you know what? I think instead of taking a chance that a plane would go down in the Atlantic Ocean, let's send it on a ship in the winter of 1962. So on December 14th, despite many objections and almost so many concerns that the whole deal fell apart, they pack her up. They put her in a storage container. And I could go on for probably 10 minutes just telling you about this storage unit that they're using to ship her and how it's created to, not only so it won't move around or it won't, it can't be hurt if it falls into the ocean or, whatever. They get it all packed up in this device that they've decided is going to be the safest way to move it. They leave Paris on a very icy, foggy day. There's been an accident just outside of Paris where 150 cars have collided the night before because the roads are slick. But somehow this makes sense to drive 160 miles to Le Havre, which I believe is like on the northwest coast, a coastal town, from which the SS France is going to depart at 3:15 p.m. on December 14th of 1962. Somehow that makes sense, right? So they do get the Mona Lisa there. By December 15th, some people on the ship, these wealthy French or wealthy Europeans or wealthy Americans traveling back to the United States, are very concerned that something unusual is going on. There are sections of the the SS France that they are not allowed to go near. They are not, this is it. You can't go any closer. This is restricted. They think there's something related to the Cold War. There could be a bomb. There could be some kind of, the Cuban Missile Crisis had just taken place in October, late October of 1962, where JFK had to talk down Nikita Khrushchev and about what was going on in Cuba. This is just a few weeks after this. And so finally, they have to tell the people on the ship, they're already out on the Atlantic. They have to say, no, there's no bomb, there's no Cold War threat, there's no, we're shipping the Mona Lisa across the Atlantic Ocean on this ship. And isn't this going to be fun? The chef prepares dinners and meals and pastries, they've had to break the news. They've had to break the silence. They go all out and celebrate the fact that the Mona Lisa is there with them on that ship by creating food and beverages and whatever to celebrate her presence there. However, on the 16th of December, it gets dicey. There's a big storm, 60-mile-per-hour winds. There's this huge storm out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and people back in Paris are going, I knew it would happen. I knew that we should not have lent the Mona Lisa. It takes the ship's captain a full day to get the ship out of this storm into safer waters, away from the winds, away from the ice and the storm. And finally, it appears that, yes, it's going to all work out so that on December 19th of 1962, which is where we started our talk, the Mona Lisa arrives at New York Harbor. It's a good time to take a break? Okay, thank you. I'm going to just backtrack maybe and just tell you a little bit more about that storm and about even sorry, I didn't get to the right place in the book to share some of this with you, but it says, back to about the announcement that the Mona Lisa was on the ship. I'm just filling in some time while we all gather again here. It says that, this French superliner was a 66,000-ton ship. It featured 22 elevators, 11 decks, 6 dining rooms. Its wealthy passengers traveled in much the same luxurious style as the passengers of the Titanic, observing the formalities of the captain's table and the elite camaraderie of the salon. According to one account, when several passengers were refused entrance to an area of the first-class passageway and noticed unusual activity, their suspicions were aroused. When further reports of extensive security and strange military-like activity started circulating among the ship's passengers, some feared that the ship was carrying a secret device, possibly nuclear, as something related to the Cold War. And against the express wishes of Mona Lisa's French escorts, the ship's captain was forced to reveal the truth. The passengers were not traveling with a secret Cold War weapon, but with the illustrious Mona Lisa. So I love how she says it, much better than I tried to explain it to you earlier. And also about that storm, see if I can just share this real quickly too. It says, as French officials kept a 24-hour vigil over the great treasure, every conceivable detail was provided for her safety and comfort. Such noble precautions, however, couldn't safeguard the Mona Lisa from the threats of Mother Nature. Only 2 days into her voyage, the 11-deck luxury liner encountered rough seas as the ship entered an unexpected storm with fierce winds. In Paris, the winds whipped, whined, and whistled through the streets of the capital as it never does, except when there is a great storm on the Atlantic, wrote someone in the Washington Post. With the tempest which arose in the night over all northern Europe, producing winds of 60 to 80 miles per hour in France, many minds turned to the ocean, where the liner France was carrying the world's most famous painting toward the United States. As the storm intensified and the ship was hit by turbulent and choppy seas, dishes crashed to the deck and passengers were knocked to the ground. Many aboard ship stayed inside their cabins waiting for the worst to pass. Broken glasses and wine bottles were strewn about the floor. And on the evening of December 16th, conditions worsened as the ship encountered gales of near hurricane force. Passengers lurched into each other's arms as 45-foot waves and winds of 60 miles per hour struck her abaft and broadside. By daybreak, all of France learned of the threat and feared for Mona Lisa's safety. So for a brief period, communication with the ship was lost. One headline summed up the peril facing the masterpiece. Paris fears for Mona Lisa's safety in storm at sea. Straps securing the painting's crate were tightened, while woozy guards kept vigil outside the Mona Lisa's first-class cabin as the massive ship heaved from side to side. It took Captain Georges Coissel nearly 6 hours, just 6 hours. I probably expanded that time frame. But it took him nearly 6 hours to maneuver the giant ship completely out of harm's way. Apprehension in Washington was eased only after radio station Europe #1, managed to contact the ship and learn from the captain that the France was now beyond the storm area and the Mona Lisa was perfectly secured. Whew. Why fly her over when you can, brave a storm on the Atlantic in the winter? John Walker is getting ready to receive this painting in Washington, D.C., he's not worried about vandalism or someone breaking in. He's worried about winter weather in Washington, D.C., as this painting is getting closer and closer to arrive. I got to find my pointer. Oh, here it is. But she does arrive in New York City at the harbor on December 19th, as I've mentioned earlier. John Walker gives a speech. And let's see if I can share at least a bit of this with you. He says, "The most important single work of art ever to cross the ocean, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci, has come to America through the generosity of the French Republic. I would like to express the gratitude of the American people for this gesture of solidarity and friendship. His Excellency, the Minister of Cultural Affairs, André Malraux, on a recent trip to Washington, said very truly that the supreme achievements of genius belong to all humanity. Instinctively, we feel that such masterpieces are the real justification of our precarious life on this planet. But though in one sense the Mona Lisa belongs to all humanity, in another it is an important part of the artistic patrimony of France. For it was one of the pictures Leonardo took with him across the Alps when he made his final journey at the invitation of the French King Francis I to his newly adopted country, where he stayed the remaining years of his life. Thus, the travels of this great work of art are woven into the history of France. Its present journey, its longest voyage, will leave a deep imprint on the cultural history of the United States. An ambassador of goodwill between the two republics, this most inscrutable of ladies will, I am sure, perform her mission of friendship with unparalleled success. And when she leaves America, she will take back to France the affection and gratitude of us all for the honor of her visit." Great words. So he makes this speech, and then the Mona Lisa starts a 250-mile trip from New York City, the harbor there in New York City, to Washington, D.C. It has to be orchestrated and thought through completely as well for security reasons, for just safety. They decide, actually it was a direct order from President Kennedy, that a Secret Service agent, a man named John Campion, would be locked inside the back of the van that was sent by the National Gallery of Art to transport the painting. So the Secret Service agent is going to be in there, locked in there. They also decide that New York City police should clear traffic from the city's tunnels along the route before the van carrying the masterpiece would pass through. According to one report, several sharpshooters were stationed on rooftops in a few strategic locations, but the details of the security operations in place were kept strictly secret. So with sirens screaming and red lights flashing, the 8-car convoy made up of police, Secret Service, and Treasury Department agents proceeded to the Lincoln Tunnel. The motorcade was escorted by state troopers in New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. As the procession crossed each state line, motorcycle officers roared into view and joined the convoy, taking turns as her official escort. So the state troopers from one state would leave and the next state would take over. During the entire route, As I said on my screen here, during the entire route, the Mona Lisa's entourage never stopped for a single red light. Those police officers made sure they kept going. They did need to stop, though, for gas and to go to the bathroom, right? We had to just take a little break. So this poor guy, Campion, who's locked, the Secret Service agent, they get to a gas station, and once the procession fully stopped, the doors to the gallery van or truck were unlocked, and the Secret Service agent, Mr. Campion, leaped into the fresh air. A reporter who was traveling along with them, dashed inside the gas station where he promptly purchased 2 cups of coffee and a hot dog, and he shared one with the Secret Service agent. What a nice guy. Despite the sensitive nature of the assignment, the Secret Service agent could not help but smile as the reporter downed the hot dog and shared colorful details about the historic voyage across the Atlantic, because he had been on that whole voyage. Okay, we must keep going. So, yes, so they get to Washington, D.C., and it's December, and, guess what the weather's like in Washington, D.C.? Nearly as bad as it was the day they left Paris, icy, slick, they're coming in. They just have to get this painting in this crate that they've designed to secure her, and they've made it across the ocean. They just have to do one more leg to get her to the National Gallery of Art and put her into a climate-controlled storage vault in the gallery there until it's time for her exhibition, which wouldn't start until later in January of 1963. So it's still 1962. I'm going to share a couple of things now with you. This is the card, the Christmas card, the image that Jackie Kennedy used for her family's Christmas card in December of 1962. It's an image of Jackie in a sleigh with her young children, Caroline and John Jr., on the south lawn of the White House. That might be Macaroni. Remember Caroline Kennedy's pony? Macaroni pulling the sleigh. So she chose that. They also are participating in some holiday activities, which are now annual events, including the lighting of the outdoor Christmas tree on the mall there on the, it's moved around. It's been on the south lawn, but it's on the mall. You see the Washington Monument in the background there, so it's on the south side of the White House. So this is happening on December 17th. This is while the Mona Lisa is still en route to New York. But they have the Marine Corps Band, the Tuskegee Institute Choir. They've got a nationally televised event where they're lighting this outdoor Christmas tree. And in his address, because the president normally makes some short speech at this lighting ceremony, JFK actually alludes to something that I alluded to a little bit ago, the Cuban Missile Crisis that had taken place from October 16th to 29th. And JFK on December 17th is saying, after a year when the peace has been sorely tried in our world, we just hope for peace in the future. So this is all happening. The Kennedys are getting ready to go down to Florida, to Palm Beach, Florida. And why? Because JFK's father, Joseph P. Kennedy, has suffered a stroke, maybe even in 1961. He's not doing real well. They're going to celebrate the holidays with the Kennedy members of the Kennedy family in Florida. And, they're looking forward to a better year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, after, what will soon be the safe arrival of the Mona Lisa. And Jackie Kennedy must have had at least a little hint that maybe she had something special to look forward to in 1963. She might have suspected in late December that she was expecting another baby. And that's another reason that she was looking forward to the coming year. So now I'm showing you, oh, and I didn't put out a map. I actually have a map that this image is from of the National Gallery of Art. This is something I picked up in DC last year. I guess the building has actually two different, the gallery actually has two different buildings, but the Mona Lisa, sorry, wrong button. I want to push this button. Okay, so the Mona Lisa is going to be displayed, exhibited in the West Building here along 7th Street, and there's an entrance there. This is where the Kennedys, they've got this all figured out. The Kennedys are going to arrive the evening of the grand opening. They're going to come in through a doorway on the side here. They're going to go up an elevator to the 2nd floor. They're going to have the Mona Lisa hanging there. Again, it's small. It's going to be hanging kind of high up with like a maroon velvet background. It's going to have bulletproof glass in front of it. It's going to have been stored and checked like every hour on the hour. In fact, the French woman who was the head of the Louvre's, division of whatever it would be called, was going to be there checking the humidity and the temperature and all the conditions to make sure that the Mona Lisa was safe. But they've got this all thought through how they're going to make it happen in the West Building when they have the grand opening in January of 1963. The people are going to come into the gallery. They're going to come upstairs. They're going to head towards this rotunda, and they're going to head down this way to the West Garden Court. The other sculpture and paintings are going to be removed, but they're going to, kind of see the Mona Lisa hanging fairly high up as they approach it. They're going to snake them through some extra galleries, maybe on the way up to the 2nd floor, just so that John Walker can share his treasures with people, with this kind of captive audience that wants to see the Mona Lisa, but he wants them to know what else is there in his gallery that they might be interested in. So it's an opportunity for him to do some marketing, perhaps. So I went into that West Building. I found the rotunda here in the middle. Again, it was last December, so it was beautiful with all the poinsettias. And I looked down the hallway to see, kind of where people would be walking or would have walked, I guess, in 1963 to see the Mona Lisa. I just like to be there and kind of walk in the same pathways that where these things took place. So it was a treat to see this. So this is how it began to play out. The Kennedys were in Florida, but Jackie returns to D.C. on the 8th of January, and that's the same day that the Mona Lisa is taken from that climate-controlled, very secure, very, very much the place where she needed to be in order to stay safe and to make sure everything was fine before they moved her away from the storage vault to the West Hall of the National Gallery. So she comes out from her storage on the 8th. And then on the 9th of January, 1963, there's going to be a preview event. What another PR and marketing coup this was. They decide to allow members of the press to come with their families, with their children, to see the Mona Lisa at an event from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. that evening. Bring in the press, get them involved and get the story out and, make the hoopla even greater by having these folks here. And they'll come and they'll bring their kids for this once-in-a-lifetime, perhaps, opportunity. Meanwhile, there's a dinner at the French embassy, and Jackie Kennedy was friendly with the wife of the ambassador from France to the United States. Their last name was Alphand, A-L-P-H-A-N-D. And so Madame Alphand is hosting this big league dinner at the French embassy. And after that, everybody's going to go over to the National Gallery for a VIP opening ceremony that's not going to start until 10 o'clock in the evening, right? Let me find another page to read from. Okay. So the dinner was great. The press event was great, but there were a few little problems at the gallery. You know, part of the problem was that they had to calculate how many of these VIP guests would fit into this space. You could see, you know, that it was a long hallway, but, you know, it wasn't huge. They calculated it would hold 1,782 people, if I'm correct. You know, that would kind of be the maximum, like almost, I'm sorry, maybe it's 1872, and I'm so close to this page, sorry. I am so close. I'm sorry. Here we go. It was 1872. They decided that the rotunda, the space outside the columns, could accommodate 768 people. Inside the columns, the room would hold another 528 people, and the space between the hall's west side door and gallery 48 would handle 576 for a total of 1,872 standing guests. You know, the problem was they invited 2,000 people. So it was packed. They did invite someone you've probably heard of. Uh-oh, that's my ringtone. That's so sorry. I was sure that was my phone, Bev. That happens. Yes. They invited a man, a singer you might have heard of, Nat King Cole, who had a famous song called Mona Lisa, right? Nat King Cole had to send a telegram to the gallery trustees with the news that he sadly could not make it to Washington. My wife and I sincerely regret our inability to join you at a showing of that famous lady's, that famous lady, Mona Lisa. As you know, she has been the heart of my career. Therefore, it is with a great deal of sentiment that I shall continue paying her tribute in song. I just can't be there that night. They're probably glad. They didn't have room for him anyway, you know. They're starting, they're getting ready, they're waiting for the Kennedys to arrive, and they get there. And okay, wait a minute. I'm still here about the dinner. Here it is. The presidential party arrives on 7th Street, that side entrance, and John Walker escorted the entourage and their Secret Service guards to the elevator, which was to take them to the main floor. But the gallery's longtime elevator operator became so nervous at the sight of Jackie Kennedy, the First Lady, that he hit the stop button by mistake instead of the go button, you know, back when you had an elevator person that had to push all the buttons for you. When he next pushed a button to go up, nothing happened. He pushed it again, nothing. John Walker, the director of the National Gallery of Arts, glanced at Jackie, who simply smiled. After several anguished moments as the operator clumsily tried to get the elevator moving, the president decided that the entourage should simply take the stairs. So Mrs. Kennedy lifted her gown and gingerly climbed the stairs, holding the president's arm. Vice President Johnson, who had recently suffered a heart attack, followed closely behind. And you'll see in the picture, somehow LBJ was misinformed about the dress code that night. He's the only man there wearing white tails instead of black tie. Oops, faux pas. So anyway, the red-coated Marine Corps band was playing the Star-Spangled Banner. And then they played Hail to the Chief when the president showed up. Elegantly coiffed in her strapless pink chiffon gown, Jackie Kennedy stole the spotlight. She had diamond drop earrings designed by Harry Winston. We hear about him at the Oscars, right? And anyway, Andre Malraux stood to address the packed audience of politicians and diplomats at this VIP reception, none of who could see the Mona Lisa because of the bright television lights. The glare of the spotlights ricocheted off the shatterproof, bulletproof glass protecting the Mona Lisa, making the painting a whitewashed blur. Standing at the podium, Malraux turned toward President Kennedy and delivered a speech that in French that would be later repeated in English. And he said, why was the Mona Lisa sent to the United States? Malraux asked. The answer, he declared, was that no other nation would have received her like the United States. But few of any of the people there heard him. The microphone system had failed, and the cocktail drinking crowd was getting too noisy anyway. The Marines guarding the painting soon worried that the mob would surge forward, and the Secret Service agents whisked Rose Kennedy, the president's mother, into another wing of the gallery for protection. It was not at all going as planned. Dean Rusk was there. He was supposed to introduce the president, I believe, but his voice was barely audible above the tumult. And finally, the president himself went to the podium, went to the lectern, and he also failed to silence the chatter. He barely disguised his irritation. But while thanking the nation of France for lending the priceless, now remember, or maybe I've told you, my husband's from Boston, so this makes sense. He's reminding the audience that the priceless Mona Lisa had been lent from France. He wryly recalled that once when it was displayed in Florence, an unruly crowd had broken the gallery windows. Our own reception is more orderly, Kennedy shouted, though perhaps as noisy. So Kennedy's using his campaign voice. There's no amplification. So he's yelling and trying to be heard over the crowd. It says, without hesitation, he kept on. Once the audience was more or less quiet, Kennedy read from his prepared address a finely crafted tribute to the painting, its artists, and the two countries' shared aspirations. We'll go on. Let's see some pictures of that night. So here's Jackie Kennedy wearing a size 10 Oleg Cassini, a pink strapless gown. She was pregnant, but not so much that it showed, and so the gown still fit her. She's standing in between Madame and Monsieur Malraux, and there's JFK, and that's Dean Rusk. You might remember, some of you might remember his name as a Kennedy official. Here they are. I guess the painting wasn't that high up, but it was above everybody's eye level. It was up above their heads, in fact, behind the bulletproof glass, with the dark velvet backdrop behind it. JFK's trying to make his speech. Andre Malraux is trying to understand it, perhaps. Jackie's looking like Jackie, just quite elegant. And they said it made Madame Malraux look extremely matronly in the gown that she chose to wear in contrast to Jackie's pink strapless dress. And there they are, Jaqueline and Andre, just chatting it up, having a great time. The picture on the right is with Jackie and the French ambassador and his wife, the Alphonse, Monsieur and Madame Alphonse. There's LBJ in his white tails instead of black tie. Probably not real happy that his wife maybe goofed. I'm sure he blamed it on her, but sitting with some of the VIPs. And here's a color portrait so you can really see how it must have been that night and what it must have been like to be there. Jackie just looks gorgeous, right? She's in her element. This is what she dreamed of for a year and a half or more, and it's happening. So over the next 3+ weeks, Mona Mania or Lisa fever gripped Washington, D.C. They called it by both of those names. People were just gaga over what was going on. People had to line up in the cold. Again, it's now January, but still winter weather. The first lady in line was named Ruth Emanuel from Langley Park, Maryland. She had been waiting for hours, but she was thrilled to be there and be the first one in the door. The line stretched all the way down the street, probably along, it was at Constitution Avenue, I forget, one of those long streets by the mall, to the north side of the mall. People entered the gallery 10 wide, 10 people abreast. They finally winnowed it down, so there were only 3 or 4 people wide by the time they got up to the Great Rotunda. And as they got closer and closer to the Mona Lisa, then they were only 2 across, double file. Many people brought their children. Some of their people even put the children on their shoulders so the children would have a better view of the Mona Lisa. One little boy snuck in a puppy. I don't think that was supposed to happen, but it did. And people came from all over. Let me see if I can find this page. Wait a minute. Elevator issues. Here it is. Yes, it said that 36 art lovers from North Carolina chartered a plane to fly to Washington, and they painted a likeness of the Mona Lisa on the fuselage. Visitors came from Memphis, Myrtle Beach, New Orleans, and New London, Connecticut, Time magazine reported, for their chance to experience the treasure from the Louvre. As the exhibition gained unprecedented attention, Walker, the director of the National Gallery, directed his guards to route visitors through other galleries so they would be forced to view more art objects before they entered before they exited the museum. This is delightful, John Walker said. She's attracting people who have never been here before, and we route them through other rooms on their way out. Let them see a little Rembrandt, too, he said. Kim, you might find some ideas of how to route people through the McConnell Center here. So we continue here. Yes, this is delightful, he said. So January 10th, when the exhibit opened to the public, they had 12,000 people that first day that would come through, in spite of the very cold temperatures. Ordinary Americans, lots of them who might have been lucky enough to live close enough to Washington, D.C. to take the day off and make this happen, came to see one of the most beautiful works of art in human history. The next day, they had 28,000 people there. They had to extend the closing time of the National Gallery, and it closed later in the evening at 9 p.m. And this went on and on for weeks until February 3rd, which was the final day of the biggest blockbuster exhibit in National Gallery of Art history. So they had people coming in through the last second trying to see this piece of work. And then on February 4th, the Mona Lisa was packed up again and departed to be exhibited. They had been able to negotiate this second exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So once again, she's loaded into that special crate. She's taken by van with a whole entourage of security and troopers and probably that Secret Service man, agent locked in the back of the van with her, and they head for New York City. So the timeline of the exhibition there included the arrival on February 4th, and then the exhibit opened on the 7th of February at 10 a.m. It was on exhibit. The Mona Lisa was actually there perhaps a little longer than in Washington, D.C. The final day of their blockbuster exhibit had over 1 million, the final day was March 4th, and they had over 1 million visitors during that span of time. that the Mona Lisa was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Another huge success, right? So, time to pack her up and try to make sure that Mona Lisa gets safely back to France, right? She's removed from display on the 7th of March. She's ready for her trip home. Now she's on a United States liner, not a French liner. And JFK waits until he knows that she's safely back to France or under at least French custody. So on March 8th of 1963, I'm sorry, she's not back in France. She's just in the custody of French officials on March 8th of 1963. And JFK sent the following message to His Excellency General Charles de Gaulle, President of the French Republic, dated March 8, 1963. Dear Mr. President, so from one president to another, I am informed that the Mona Lisa has been safely returned to French hands. No work of art ever exhibited in the United States has had a comparable impact. More than 2 million people, many standing in line for hours, many standing in line for hours, saw the painting in its 52 days in Washington and New York. The visit of the Mona Lisa has produced the greatest outpouring of appreciation for a work of art in our history. In these days marked with difficulties, I am personally most grateful for your generosity in confiding the Mona Lisa to my care. Because remember, this was a loan directly to the President and First Lady of the United States. This act of friendship, JFK says, expresses the deeper undercurrents which have done so much to sustain our peoples throughout their history. May I express the warm gratitude of the American people as well as my own personal appreciation for your kindness in lending the United States the most celebrated painting in the world. Sincerely yours, John F. Kennedy. So it took them 5 days to get back. It was a windswept and choppy sea, but the masterpiece arrived back at Le Havre, France on March 12th and would be safely returned to the Louvre in Paris after this amazing and incredible and dangerous and scary and perfectly wonderful gift of the French people to the United States. And just to kind of end our discussion today, I need to talk a little bit more about 1963 and the years that have followed since then, because 1963 turned out to be a year of this huge cultural triumph that Jackie Kennedy and her husband participated in. But it became one of huge and just unthinkable personal tragedy for them as well. First of all, that baby that she knew she was carrying as this was playing out in the early part of the year was born prematurely down on Cape Cod at Otis Air Force Base. Patrick Bouvier Kennedy, maybe you can remember, was born down there, had to be rushed to a children's hospital up in Boston, where he died 2 days later. He's born on August 7th of 1963 and died on August 9th. And sadly, his father died just, 3 months and a couple of weeks later. And baby Patrick Kennedy is now buried in Arlington National Cemetery beside his father, beside the eternal flame. Jackie Kennedy and her husband, John, had also had a stillborn daughter that they named Arabella, who was born before their daughter Caroline was born. And Arabella's body was moved and is also there in Arlington National Cemetery with her brother and her parents. Yes, Jackie Kennedy would eventually be buried at Arlington National Cemetery as well. But in the interim, Jackie Kennedy, after her husband's death, still was involved in the arts in Washington, D.C. and in our nation. the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts was actually, the thought of this, the project was signed into legislation during the presidency of JFK's predecessor, Dwight Eisenhower, back in 1958. They created legislation to build this national cultural center, but it didn't go it didn't go anywhere very quickly. It wasn't until 1962 when the Kennedys launched this $30 billion fundraising campaign to get the ball rolling, to make this happen. And by 1963, they had to extend the fundraising deadline. It takes a lot of effort to raise money, and especially that kind of money, $30 billion. So JFK's involved in this in 1963 before his death. By 1964, by January 23rd, so 2 months and a day after JFK is assassinated, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, actually designates that this new cultural center is going to be a living memorial to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And that's why it's now known as the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Last year, the not-for-profit Kennedy Center offered, or this year, I guess I should say, this year has offered over 2,000 cultural events each year. And I hope some of you have visited there and participated. And even if you're walking through just to see the galleries and the artwork and the sculpture and my favorite place too, the gift shop, I'm hoping that some of you have been able to enjoy that. This was a depiction of some projects. I think they were anticipating to even enlarge the facility there, but a beautiful setting on the Potomac River, right near Watergate, another famous building in the Washington, D.C. area. And we mentioned Jackie Kennedy. She lived on until May 19th of 1994. She died at the age of 64. Of course, she had remarried Aristotle Onassis and lived abroad for a while her children were still fairly young. She moved back to New York City. She became a book editor. She was still involved with the White House Historical Association. Her influence continued even into the later years of her life before she died of cancer. Again, at just age 64, seems very young now to me, in May of 1994. I have a display, some of you may have looked at it. These are some of the products that the White House Historical Association now offers to raise money toward meeting the mission and the goals that Jackie Kennedy first envisioned back in 1961 when she became First Lady and established this organization. Every year since 1981, when Nancy Reagan would have been the First Lady, but every year since 1981, the White House Historical Association has done a White House Christmas ornament that they sell. And the first 2 or 3 were pretty, just two-dimensional, pretty plain, pretty simple. The first one was an angel of peace, an angel in flight, I think it's called. The second year, they decided to use an architectural feature from George Washington's home, Mount Vernon, and it is called the Dove of Peace. So that led them to thinking, we should do an ornament for each president, and let's do them in order. The third year, they did an ornament that honored the presidency of John Adams. The fourth year, the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, and so on. Occasionally, there'd be a 200th anniversary or a 100th anniversary of something important related to the White House, the laying of the cornerstone, or the 200th anniversary even of the presidency. So a few years, the ornament hasn't honored a specific president, but rather a date or a year in presidential history. But 3 years ago, in 2020, it came to be the turn of John Fitzgerald Kennedy to be honored with a Christmas ornament. They're now, this is 3 years later, this year's ornament honors Gerald Ford, for instance. So JFK was in 2020, LBJ in 2021, Richard Nixon last year, and Gerald Ford this year, and probably Jimmy Carter next year, unless there's a round number anniversary. And it's going to be a round number anniversary for him. He'll turn 100 years old next October. So wouldn't that be wonderful if he lived long enough to see his ornament come out? But the White House Historical Association has a quarterly journal. I selected this issue to put in this image because it's got Jackie and John Kennedy there in front of the 1961 Blue Room Christmas tree that you saw earlier. This is a catalog from last year of all the things that they sell to raise money toward their mission. This is the ornament from 3 years ago, and I wanted to show you the front of the ornament. Has this official White House portrait of JFK, and I'm sorry I forget the artist who created this portrait, the portrait artist, but I do know that this image of JFK was actually something that they used a photograph, I believe, of JFK's younger brother, Teddy Kennedy, Edward Moore Kennedy, who was standing at JFK's funeral looking down. And so they used basically Teddy Kennedy as a model to create this posthumous portrait of JFK, which now hangs in the White House as his official White House portrait. And I wanted to tell you, I wanted to show you, I must tell you, each of these ornaments, they now cost about $25 a piece. They go on sale in January if you have a favorite president and want to support the White House Historical Association. You know, certainly buy gifts now or, you know, buy things later on sale. But yeah, each of these little ornaments comes in a wonderful box that has something related to the president. So it has the JFK's initials on this. And it comes with a little brochure that talks about the life and times of the president, what, you know, his biography, as well as some of the important events during his presidency. But the next image is what I want to show you on the back of JFK's ornament, and it's down here. And you're welcome to look at it. Some of these ornaments I've taken to places and people have dropped them and they've broken. This one is not quite as fragile, so I've turned it over so that you can see on the back of JFK's ornament, it mentions Jaqueline Bouvier Kennedy. You can maybe see her name at the top, an image of the White House there, and the words, "The White House belongs to the American people." So that's how I'm ending my talk today. I appreciate your attention. So I thank you, or as Jaqueline Kennedy would say, merci beaucoup for your attention. I can stick around and answer questions to the best of my ability if anybody has any. But this is what I do. I do lots of programs. I should tell some of you, if you're here in the Worthington area, I do programs several times a year for the Griswold Center, which are typically available for you to participate via Zoom. Occasionally they're in person, but I typically do my programs by Zoom. And I'm a frequent presenter for them. If you're interested, I do have business cards down here, and I'd be glad to tell you what I'm scheduled to do through November of next year, even at the Griswold Center. I also do programs at a variety of senior communities and for church groups and women's groups and book clubs and whatever. I raise money for my Walk to End Alzheimer's team. Both of my parents had dementia at the end of their lives. They both would have turned 100 years old this year. They were both born in 1923. My mom was only 58 years old in 1981 when she was diagnosed back then with premature senility. She lived for almost 18 years with dementia, and we later knew it was Alzheimer's. 8 years after my mom died, my dad was diagnosed by a neurologist with Alzheimer's. So this is my personal anti-Alzheimer's therapy. This is what I do to learn new information and to put it into a PowerPoint presentation and to find somebody willing to let me have a chance to share it with audiences like you. It seems to be working for now, knock on wood. But thank you, Kim, for this opportunity. Thank you for being here today in person. And for those of you who attended via live stream, thank you. I appreciate your attention.